The hearing on the Subcommittee on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call a recess at any time. Today's hearing will examine the ways in which unions put politics over people through the lens of rampant union anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, the politicization of unions is not new. The National Institute for Labor Relations Research estimates that unions spent about $25 billion in political donations during the 2022 election cycle, or far more than the roughly $2 billion they report as political activities. In the 2020 presidential campaign, President Biden received $27.5 million in direct donations from labor organizations, while President Trump received less than $360,000. While the working class seems to be moving in favor of the GOP in the upcoming election cycle, it's clear that union bosses sold out to the left long ago. Additionally, the response by union leaders to the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel have exposed yet another way that unions are beholden to the radical left instead of to the workers they claim to represent. Rather than focus on their stated purpose of negotiating better workplace conditions for workers, unions choose to spend time and money advancing their divisive and anti-American political agenda. Our next witness is Mr. William Sussman, who is a graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome.
In 2022, a plurality of MIT graduate students voted to install this union as our exclusive bargaining agent, and in September 2023, MIT capitulated to its demand for a contract with mandatory dues. Then came October 7th. According to the American Jewish Committee, Hamas terrorists waged the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, slaughtering babies, raping women, burning whole families alive, and taking hundreds of innocents hostage. The blood had not yet dried when my colleagues at MIT declared, "Victory is ours." The full-time GSU staff organizer told NBC 10 Boston, "Those who rebel against oppression cannot be blamed for rebelling against that oppression." In November, my union representative joined anti-Israel protesters who were occupying a building, and when threatened with suspensions, the GSU backed the protesters. Meanwhile, the GSU illegally threatened to terminate anyone who refused to pay for their so-called activism. I filed a charge against the union with the National Labor Relations Board, which agreed that the GSU had violated our Beck rights. However, the NLRB refused to require training of union agents who continue to break the law. In January, when MIT brought disciplinary charges against 2 graduate student protesters, the GSU blamed external pressure from billionaire donors and right-wing politicians and organized another protest, this time in front of the Discrimination and Harassment Office. One picket sign read, "Anti-Zionism does not equal anti-Semitism." In April, the GSU pushed through a ceasefire resolution that does not mention peace, hostages, or Hamas. And in May, the GSU vice president was arrested at yet another protest. She was banned from campus, but remains on paid union leave. As I wrote in the Wall Street Journal, Jewish graduate students are a minority at MIT. We can't remove the GSU or disabuse it of its anti-Semitism. But we also can't support an organization that actively works toward the eradication of the Jewish homeland where I have family living now. That is why many of us asked for a religious accommodation that would divert our compulsory dues from the UE to a charity. The union denied my request, telling me in a letter that no principles, teachings, or tenets of Judaism prohibit membership in or the payment of dues or fees to a labor union, that one of UE's founders was Jewish, and that opposition to BDS isn't a position I hold for religious reasons. In other words, UE thinks it understands my faith better than I do. With the help of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, I joined 4 other Jewish graduate students in filing discrimination charges against the union with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. In response, the GSU chanted shame against us, calling our lawyers well-financed. They forgot to mention our horns. Facing potential charges of its own, MIT began approving religious accommodations, and the union followed suit. But UE represents graduate students at a dozen other universities, and it should not take 5 discrimination charges to exercise our freedom of religion and association. This Congress should pass the National Right to Work Act so that unions have to earn their dues and think twice before discriminating against minorities. As a lifelong Democrat, I would like to conclude with a warning for my fellow party members. A major union president who voted for FDR 4 times would later in life say, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. That union president was Ronald Reagan. If the Democratic Party leaves the Jews, we will have no choice but to leave the party. Ironically, this incentive structure is precisely what's missing from unions. Thank you for the invitation to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, sir.